Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Pope Francis has appointed as the head of the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. I think it's called the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. Now it used to be the congregation for the doctrine of the faith. Before that, it was the Holy Office of the Inquisition. Essentially, it is the office that is in charge with dealing with the doctrinal questions of the church. Basically, this is the quality control for doctrine in the church. And the man who has been appointed is none other than the Argentinian Archbishop Fernandez. And he, as it says here on this LifeSite News article, has been appointed to the top doctrinal position. This has raised concerns over his support for communion for the divorced and remarried, promotion of erotic actions, and downplaying church teaching opposing same-sex marriage. This is a doozy. This is one of the more, in the papacy of Pope Francis, this is one of the most shocking things he's done. It really is. It's one thing to give, send a letter to James Martin saying, good job, buddy. It's another thing to have visits with folks who are suspect in their morals, ideologies, religiosity, etc. It's quite another thing to appoint a man who we're going to see is, well, pray for his soul. And this article here is from LifeSite News. My friend Michael Haynes, my friend and colleague, he wrote, I think it's the best article I've seen so far. So kudos to him. It really is an impeccable piece of journalism, and it goes through much of the life of Archbishop Fernandez, who has been nicknamed Smoochy Fernandez. And why has he been nicknamed Smoochy Fernandez? I think it was Taylor Marshall who coined that term. Because in the 1990s, he literally, as a priest, wrote a book about erotic kissing. It's a true story, and we're going to go through it. So, Michael Haynes writes, Pope Francis has appointed the highly controversial Archbishop Victor Manuel Fernandez of La Plata, this is in Buenos Aires, or in Argentina, as new prefect for the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, now a dicastery. And some boilerplate information here about sort of how that happened. But here's where we get to the meat and potatoes of the problem. Fernandez will now assume his role as the head of the church's doctrinal office in mid-September. With Fernandez now in position at the head of the CDF, his roster includes, as expanded upon in the article below, an ardent promotion and defense of Amoris Laetitia, opening the door to communion for the divorced and remarried. If you don't know what Amoris Laetitia is, this is a document that, at least in the footnotes, contains what really does seem like legitimate heresy. It's actually caused some Catholics to adopt the sedevacantist position under Pope Francis. Understandably so. I'm not a sedevacantist, but I understand how you can get there. He's talked about public promotion of erotic kissing and actions. We're going to talk about that. He's downplayed the need for the defense against same-sex marriage. And he's even said he's more progressive than Pope Francis on certain issues, and how Pope Francis is basically taking the church in a direction to completely rechange it, and he's all on board with this, and he wants it to be permanent. He's a pretty shocking figure. And so as Michael Haynes points out here, Fernandez has been basically a ghostwriter for Pope Francis. Now, a lot of people don't know this, or maybe you do, maybe you don't, maybe it's not a lot, I'm just assuming. Popes sometimes write their documents. Often they write portions of, they guide them, and they basically have theologians and authors ghostwriting them. This is common. This isn't a slight against any pope. Many great popes have done this. I am sure Pope Pius X had lots of help writing Pascendi Dominici Gregis, which is arguably the greatest papal document of the last century, against modernism. And this is common. And this is common for not just popes, but politicians have speechwriters. Celebrities, when they write their biographies, they don't usually write their autobiographies. They usually have someone who's a ghostwriter, and they oversee the process. The involvement of a pope can be more or less depending on that pope. As I said, under some of the great popes, men like Reginald Gary Gru-Lagrange was sort of the brainchild behind certain documents. This is not uncommon. And Fernandez is seen as one of the primary ghostwriters for the 3 encyclicals Pope Francis has put out, Evangelii Gaudium, which I believe was mainly Benedict, so I guess it would have been Francis's part, unless he was also for Benedict, I don't know. Laudato Si, which was on the environment, and the highly controversial Amoris Laetitia. And Michael Haynes writes here, actually, you know what? I think I'll just make this a little bit bigger so everyone can see it. His role in writing Amoris Laetitia should not be unexpected. Indeed, Pope Francis had given Fernandez key roles in the running of the 2014 and 15 synods, which led to this document that seemed to teach against the Church's teaching on marriage. And he writes about the infamous Chapter 8, which opened the door for allowing divorced and remarried to receive Holy Communion. Francis responded to questions about that, whether it actually did teach that. And Francis said that there could be no other interpretation except the one provided by the bishops of Buenos Aires, or in Argentina, I guess, allowing for communion for the divorced and remarried. So basically, Pope Francis is saying, yes, if you do interpret this document, that it does open the door for communion for the divorced and remarried, then you are understanding what was written and why this document was written, which is against church teaching. Again, quite a scandal to the faith. Pope Francis was subsequently asked if this document did contain changes in discipline and the governance for the sacraments, and Pope Francis said, yes, period. So yes, this is, again, I understand why some Catholics jump to the sedevacantist position given what's happened with this. Of course, this document, Amoris Laetitia, was heavily criticized by Cardinals Burke and some others, Brandmuller and so forth, presenting the dubia, and it is seen as basically possibly heretical. So, and Fernandez defended Amoris Laetitia, as Michael Haynes writes here, and he said it is also licit to ask if acts of living together, so living together in the fornication sense, should always fall in its integral meaning within the negative precept of fornication. There can be a path of discernment open to the possibility of receiving the food of the Eucharist. I say in its integral meaning because one cannot maintain those acts in each and every case are gravely dishonest in a subjective sense. This is complete and utter theological gobbledygook. No one asked if the acts of fornication were dishonest. I'm sure they honestly engaged in fornication. But the question is whether or not these acts are contrary to the teaching of the Church, the natural law, the moral law, and so on and so forth. And yes, they are. But this Smoochie Fernandez, who will now be the head of the doctrine for the Catholic Church, well, in a couple months, unless he's struck dead, I guess, he basically is saying that in some cases, if you really, really think hard about it, you can shack up and you can go receive the Holy Eucharist. So this is an abomination. Here's a part here about how basically Fernandez is a close friend of Pope Francis, has been very welcomed by the Pope. I'll sort of skip through this part a little bit. This is a pretty interesting picture, though. Pope Francis looks very happy there. Okay, this part is really fascinating. Michael Haynes points out that Fernandez and Francis have both jointly pushed, at least it appears to be so. Again, the Pope's explainers are going to say, we're all wrong here because of all these facts. We're not understanding them properly. So let's add some distinctions here and say it appears so. In 2015, Fernandez praised Pope Francis' pontificate, arguing, quote, "No, there's no turning back from his course of action." So, according to the new head of the CDF, or soon-to-be head, the actions that Pope Francis has taken to radically change things in the Church that do appear to be heretical, and at least in some senses, those can never be changed. The Church you thought was the Catholic Church is gone. It is the Church of Francis, according to Fernandez. For example, the Pope is convinced that, this is a quote from Fernandez, the Pope is convinced that the things he's already written or said cannot be condemned as error. Again, this language from this man, he is a modernist par excellence. He really is. His vocabulary is serpentine. It's demonic. And I mean that in the sense of it being duplicitous. And that's one of the marks of Satan is duplicity, which basically means you can use terms to confuse and speak out of both sides of your mouth. This is what modernism does. And he says the Pope is convinced that the things he's already written or said cannot be condemned as error. Notice how he doesn't say, and this is why these men, this is what the Pope-splainers, be on guard for this. The Pope-splainers are going to do something like this. The Pope-splainers are going to say, I have not said, or they're going to say, this man has not said that the Pope has changed doctrine. This man has said that the Pope is convinced that what he has said is orthodox. Therefore, we have to basically see it as such. You see, that's the sort of game they're going to play here. So just be on the lookout for that. He says, therefore, in the future, anyone can repeat these things without fear of being sanctioned. This is amazing. This quote right here is absolutely amazing. This tells you everything you need to know. This man is a modernist par excellence. He's saying the Pope is convinced that what he has said is completely sound. Therefore, you now have permission to spread erroneous, heresy-adjacent things without getting in trouble. He's basically saying the Pope has made it that the wolves can go amongst the sheep and they can't be disciplined. This is extremely fascinating. I mean, this is really, really devious what this man has said. And he's basically, it's a dog whistle saying, yeah, you can preach against the Catholic faith. You can act against the continuity of the sacraments for the entirety of tradition because the Pope is convinced that that's okay. So therefore, you're not going to get in trouble. That's what he's saying. He also said something else pretty shocking. He said, the Pope goes slow because he wants to be sure that the changes have a deep impact. The slow pace is necessary to ensure the effectiveness of the changes. You have to realize that he is aiming at reform that is irreversible. So the Pope is a reformer of the Church, I guess, like Martin Luther. If one day he should sense that he's running out of time and doesn't have enough time to do what the Spirit is asking him, you can be sure he will speed up. So maybe Pope Francis doesn't think he has much time left. And that's why he's appointing Smoochy Fernandez to the head of doctrine. And he's even said, as Michael Haynes says here, in many issues, I am far more progressive than Pope Francis. God help us all. Okay, let's get to, there's lots more here, but I want to get to this craziness about kissing. So again, this is so strange, but this man, a priest, wrote what is allegedly a spiritual work about kissing. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that again. He wrote what is allegedly a spiritual work, but it's about kissing. I don't know. And, I'm just going to say, historically, you couldn't even enter the seminary, and it's still the same way with traditional seminaries. I know it's this way with the Society of St. Pius X. I know it's this way with some traditional religious orders that are, like nuns and brothers and things. I'm assuming it's probably the same with Fraternity of St. Peter. I don't know, but I know for a fact with the SSPX. You can't even enter into the seminary or be approved. You can't enter into the seminary. You're not approved to enter in the seminary if you have had any sort of sexual impurity within 3 years. Not like your mind. I mean, people have to fight temptations, red-blooded males, but meaning if you fornicated, if you committed the sin of self-abuse, whatever it is, there has to be a 3-year gap between that and entering the seminary, or you won't go in. Now, of course, people could lie, but that would be gravely sinful, and you wouldn't expect, people can lie. But nonetheless, that's the policy. So here's a man who, as a priest, is writing about very erotic depictions of kissing while he's already ordained. So this is very, very shocking, because does this mean that he had, again, he could have a life before being a priest. He has a conversion. There are cases of men who have girlfriends and they, have a conversion, and that's fine. And then those 3 years have passed to prove they can be celibate. That's the point of the 3 years. And then they enter the seminary. Okay, fine. What's going on here? So anyway, move down here. So Michael Haynes writes about this book. It's called Heal Me With Your Mouth, The Art of Kissing. Even just the title is extremely creepy. It would have been written in Spanish, I guess, but El arte de los besos, maybe it would have been called. Anyway, defending the book, Fernandez stated that, in these pages, I wanted to synthesize the popular feeling, what people feel when they think of a kiss, what they experience when they kiss. So trying to synthesize the immense richness of life, these pages emerged in favor of kissing. These pages emerged in favor of kissing. Who's against kissing? This is like when politicians say, I'm against hate. Who is for hate or whatever? Anyway, I hope that they help you kiss better, that they motivate you to release the best kiss of your life. This is the kind of thing you want to hear from your priests. Please, Father, write a book about how we can have the best kiss of our life. There's nothing insanely perverted or creepy about that at all. In this book, and sorry about my dog outside. In this book, LifeSite has reported on this in the past. This has been known for a while, but if you didn't know, Fernandez defended the book as an analysis of kissing that purports to be spiritual and theological. But it's unmistakably erotic and often suggestive of ambiguous sexual relationships that might not even be heterosexual. The book also contained various photos of statues and artworks depicting people passionately kissing and embracing one another in an intimate and erotic position. Again, what else would you expect from your parish priest or head of the doctrine of the church but erotic images and books about kissing, right? Because that's, yeah. In addition to erotic poetry and verse about kissing, the book contains advice on how to make one's body more attractive to another when engaging in an intimate kiss. Of course, though, this book is merely just spiritual. But anyway. And here's a passage about how he basically goes on how we don't really need to worry ourselves too much with defending against rainbow marriage. And he says there needs to be a reference to a context close to home. I hate the way these people talk. That is always positive in light of what is being considered or proposed. Again, what he's saying is meaningless. For example, it is no good opposing same-sex marriage because people tend to see us as a group of resentful, cruel, insensitive, over-the-top, even individuals. It is an entirely different thing to talk about the beauty of marriage and the harmony of differences that form part of an alliance between man and a woman. Okay? This positive context speaks for itself when it comes to showing them that the use of the same term marriage to describe same-sex unions is unsuitable. So basically what he's saying here is, don't actually speak out against something that's against the natural law and the teachings of the church, because people will think, hey, you're telling us what the church teaches. That makes you a meanie poo-poo head. Instead, just say why what the church teaches is really nice. This is nonsense. This is like saying, don't tell your children not to run into the road and get hit by cars. Just explain to them why riding on the sidewalk with your bicycle is more fun than getting hit by a car. Although I don't even know if that analogy works because he doesn't even want to make the bad thing seem bad. So it would be more like, don't talk about the dangers of getting hit by a car. Talk about the joy of riding a bike on the sidewalk. I don't know. Anyway, so this man, Smoochy Fernandez, it might be the craziest and most awful thing Pope Francis has done yet, and that is saying a lot. Please, Pope-splainers, explain to us why this is totally fine, why it's just imprudent, why Pope Francis has just appointed someone who's just orthodox in a different way, and why everything is all good. And if you're going to make videos about people like myself and Taylor Marshall and so forth, please, can you at least use flattering headshots? It's very, for people that go on and on about charity, could you at least be charitable enough to use a screenshot or a headshot where the person isn't stuck in a funny pose? We can make everybody look stupid. If you're going to have your videos with stupid opinions, at least use pictures of your opponents, who you never speak to, that don't make them look stupid. Can we at least have enough of that charity, or is charity just for Pope-splainers? I don't know. In any case, as always, let me know what you think in the comments. This has been the Kennedy Report. Until next time, God bless.